Stella by Starlight, Chapter 33, A Patchwork of Memories. Mrs. Grayson rapped on her desk. Enough about the $25. Look, we're all a little high-strung today. How about if we do a little stories telling instead of geography? Sighs of relief came from every direction. Let's circle up on the floor. She adjusted the ash pan, stoked the fire, and closed the lid. Stella had to admit she was glad her teacher had closed the grate. Nobody wanted to be seeing flames of any sort this morning. Are y'all ready? Mrs. Grayson asked. Yes'm, the children replied. Stella glanced at JoJo, smiled, and tried to cheer herself up. How many of you have a patchwork quilt that your mama or your grandma sewed herself? She asked. Almost every hand went up. You know, children, quilts, like stories, are part of our heritage, part of our culture. Some quilts even tell stories. Our past is a patchwork of memories and tales. You all keep that forever tucked in your pockets, you hear? Yes'm. Stella thought about that. Each of the families in Bumblebee was sort of like a piece of a big old quilt. Their very own patchwork already woven together. For example, the teacher went on, the story I'm about to tell you was sewn into a quilt my own grandmother made, so it's very special to me. She paused and gave them a curious smile. Did you know that African people used to have the power, she paused, to fly? That's not possible, John Steve interrupted. It's a story, Carolyn retorted. Now be quiet and listen before she makes us do state capitals or something. Mrs. Grayson continued. Flying was a gift given to the people because they cared for the sky and the earth and the animals. Men would soar in the heavens each night just to talk to the eagles. Women, who glided on streams of air, wove pillows from the clouds. Men taught their sons the secrets of flying, and women taught their daughters, so the knowledge was passed from ancestor to descendant. It was a glorious time. Stella looked out of the window wishfully. Clearly, the passing down had stopped long ago. But it so happened that a whole generation of the African people were captured and removed from their land, and in time their memories faded. The memories of the glistening beauty of the great blue heron, the rosy pink feathers of the flamingo, and the powerful wings of the red-necked falcon. And because of their bondage, the connection between parent and child, between elder and newborn, was destroyed, and the people lost the knowledge of how to fly. Or so they thought. Mrs. Grayson halted for a moment and drank a sip of water from a mug on her desk. Don't stop, Hazel said, leaning forward. Patience, little one, Mrs. Grayson said. Then she continued. Slavery was hard, children. The people had to work from sunup to sundown. They had to pick, cut, plant, carry, cook, clean, wash, rake, hoe, dig, clear, build, and more. Every day was a struggle. Every day was full of unhappiness and pain. There was no joy. Now it came to pass that a young woman was living on one plantation, a woman of strength, a woman with dreams. Her name was Zalika, which in the Swahili language means born to royalty. She constantly looked to the sky. She was able to predict the moment the sun would peep above the horizon and the instant the land would fade into night. She had named every cloud, even though no two were ever the same. She knew when the sky would pour down rain upon them and when the sun would burn their backs. She memorized the flight patterns of the birds as they soared above, studying them every single day. One hot summer day, the man who called himself her master got very angry with Zalika. He screamed horrible words to her. Zalika refused to respond. She gazed at the sky instead. That made him even angrier, so he got out his whip to beat her. Whip? Randy asked. I don't think I want to hear this. Let me finish, Randy, Mrs. Grayson replied. Trust the tale. Randy shifted in his seat, arms folded across his chest. So on this day, Mrs. Grayson continued, young Zalika, who had never known even one day of joy in her life, decided she would not be beaten again. Goody, whispered Claudia. The man raised the cruel leather whip above his head. His arms trembled with rage, his lips twisted with anger, his eyes filled with hatred. But Zalika would not even look at him. Her eyes were focused on the turquoise sky. The full force of the man's arm came crashing towards Zalika. The tip of the whip curled like a serpent's tail, and it crashed down, 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 down upon the hard-baked earth. Zalika was gone. Even Stella's eyes went wide. The man who called himself her master looked around in astonishment. Mrs. Grayson said, Then he heard peals of laughter above his head. Shrieks of joy. He looked up and saw Zalika in the sky. She was flying. She fluttered and floated and hugged the clouds she had named and flung them towards the sun, and she laughed. Oh, how she laughed! The memories of the ancestors long buried within her had emerged majestically. The other slaves looked up to the sky and saw Zalika flying, and the memories came flooding back to them as well. "Come," Zalika said, "come with me." And so they did. One by one they looked up to the heavens, and their feet lifted from the ground. Their bodies swayed in the breeze. One by one they shed the abuse and pain and enveloped themselves in the memories of their ancestors. Every single one of them took to the sky and drifted away, and they never came back. Stella cheered and clapped at the end of the story with everyone else. Mrs. Grayson got up, stretched, and told the class, "Looks like it's going to be a good day after all." Stella walked over to the window and looked out. The sky was so blue that morning, so very blue. Chapter 34. Typing, scratched out, typing. This is my very first writing with the typewriter, marked out. I roll the paper in carefully, tap out each letter, and words appear like magic on the page. I have to hit this handle on the roller, and it moves to the next line. I'm very slow, and I keep messing up. Mama just showed me how to put a period at the end of a sentence and how to do capital letters. Hold the shift key. Type a letter. Undo shift key. Type more. Where is the comma and the question mark? Found them. How do you fix mistakes? There's no eraser. How do newspaper people do this? People type whole books? Must take years. Even though my essay did not get picked for the contest, I think my writing is getting better. But not my typing for sure. Marked out, sure. Chapter 35, Walking Up to Freedom Land. Today, Tuesday, November the 8th, was brisk and cold. Stella's fingertips stung as she washed up quickly and dashed back inside to the warmth of Mama's fireplace. Her father was out in the barn, forking hay to the mule, taking care of the chickens for her and milking the cow. "I'm sorry I didn't get up in time to help you make the fire, Mama," Stella said, wrapping her fingers around a hot mug of apple tea. "Doing for my family is my job," her mother said simply. "Drink your tea." "Is Papa going to vote today?" Stella asked. Her mother closed her eyes. "Lord help us, yes." "Mama, what if the Klan decides to burn down our house? Or do something worse?" Stella asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I have no idea. It's been spooky quiet since the Spencer fire. No threats, no midnight riders. It's the silence that scares me." Stella clutched the mug tighter and blew on her tea. When her father burst back into the house in a rush of frigid air, Stella's mother jumped up. "What's got you so itchy, Georgia?" Papa asked as he pulled his chair up to the fire. "It's election day. My husband thinks he has to vote. Jojo has a cold. I ripped my best apron on a nail. I spilled the bacon grease. There are crazy people who want to hurt my family. Houses are getting torched. I worry about what my children will eat this winter." "Take your pick," she replied sharply. "Honey, I'm sorry. I know it's rough, but I'm doing this for you, for Jojo and Stella, for all of us." His wife said, reaching for the broom. She began swiping it roughly across the floor. The spotless floor, Stella noticed. "Tell that to the undertaker." "I gotta do what I gotta do, Georgia." "Why?" she pressed. "It's not like Mr. Roosevelt needs your vote. Everybody hates Hoover because of the Depression. The newspaper says Roosevelt can't lose." "But I can," Papa replied softly. Mama gave the floor a good thwack. "Who knows what's going to be waiting for you there at the voting place?" "Georgia, this is how it's going to be," her father replied firmly. "I got to stand tall. I have a right to vote. A right, I tell you, and a responsibility." Stella sat motionless, hoping they wouldn't send her out of the room. Her mama gave the floor another wallop. "And who will stand for me and the children, for the rest of the mothers and babies of Bumblebee when we're all alone?" Stella couldn't remember ever seeing her mother so angry. "For once in my life, I must be a man," Papa replied. "I'd like to think I'm standing up, along with Mr. Spencer and Pastor Patton, standing up for all of us. If I don't stand up, I feel like I'm crouching low, and I ain't going to feel low no more." And with that, he walked over to his wife and pulled her into his arms, broom and all. Mama leaned into him, sniffing back tears. JoJo, who'd been outside with Dusty, came racing in, then yelling, "Hot diggity, looks like there's no school today." "Why not?" Stella asked with surprise. "There's a bunch of folks outside, look." Already on the porch were Mr. Spencer and Pastor Patton. "Come in," Stella's mother said quietly. "You still going to do this despite what they've done to you, to your family, Hobart?" she asked. Stella expected to see fire in Mr. Spencer's eyes, fire like the flames that had made tinder of his house. Instead, his eyes were soft, gentle, and brown like the earth. "I have to show them they didn't destroy me," he said simply. "But," Stella's mother began. Pastor Patton interrupted her. "Besides, we'll be safe enough, Georgia." He led her out to the porch, announcing, "You got to see this for yourself. Seems that we have quite an escort out here." Stella walked out with them, and her jaw dropped. It seemed every single colored man, woman, and child in town was walking up the road and convening in her front yard. John Steve was among them, bellowing, "Come on out, y'all, it's voting day." "Can I go too, Mama?" Stella asked, grabbing a cardigan sweater. Hastily, she laced up her new shoes. "Me too," JoJo chimed in, bouncing up and down. "I ain't sneezing no more." Mama touched JoJo's forehead with her palm. She hesitated, then sighed before hugging them both. "Go, be safe. I'll be here praying for all y'all." "Thanks, Mama," Stella said, hugging her back. Jonah Mills enclosed his wife's hands in both of his. Come with us, Georgia, please. We need you. I need you." Stella watched her mother's face soften, then, wiping her eyes, her mother took off her apron, tossed it on a chair, and said, "So what we waiting for?" Papa picked her up and spun her around. Stella and JoJo couldn't scramble out to join the others fast enough. As they walked down the familiar road and into town, more and more families joined them. Women in aprons and headscarves, men in work boots, barefoot children, the barber, the man who owned the bar, the undertaker. They walked quietly, solemnly with Jonah Mills, Hobart Spencer, and Pastor Patton in the lead. They walked. Stella's mother and Mrs. Hawkins linked arms, whispering, maybe even praying. Stella couldn't be sure, but she skipped along with her friends, glad Mama had come along. Randy walked alongside his father, who had swung himself into the line in spite of his crutches. "You want to ride in the wagon, Mr. Bates?" Stella offered, pointing to the one horse and buggy that brought up the end of the line. "No, child, I'm walking," he replied firmly. "Did you know Mr. Franklin Roosevelt has polio? Just like me, and he's going to be president, so I'm walking." Mrs. Hawkins started humming a tune that had to be 100 years old, a slave song, maybe. It was Claudia and a few of the first graders who joined in first, just like they did at school. Gradually, more joined in. Stella, as well, joined in singing words that hadn't quite meant as much to her before as they seemed to at this very moment. "Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to Freedom Land. Ain't gonna let no hatred turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let no hatred turn me around. Gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to Freedom Land." As they walked, the singing grew louder. It seemed to Stella that the walking went a whole lot faster as they sang. Then folks began adding their own verses. "Ain't gonna let no fire turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let no fire turn me around. Gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to Freedom Land. Ain't gonna let no Klansman turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let no Klansman turn me around. Gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to Freedom Land. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to Freedom Land." Stella craned her neck to check the end of the group. "Gosh," she said to Carolyn, "there's a line of folks stretched longer than I can see." When she turned back, she saw the polling location, which in Bumblebee was the sheriff's office, looming ahead. So did everyone else, for the crowd went silent and slowed. But her father, Mr. Spencer, and Pastor Patton continued forward. The sheriff, a lanky, red-faced man named Amos Sizemore, stood in front of the door, arms folded across his chest. The three voters stopped in front of him. held their hats in their hands, and waited. "Do you think he's let them in?" Stella whispered to Carolyn. Carolyn shook her head. "What are they waiting for?" "Hush up," Mr. Odom told Stella sharply, her finger to her lips. Stella's pulse pounded. A blue jay squawked in the distance. Everything else was noiseless anticipation. The sheriff stood, legs wide, glaring at the crowd. The sheriff glaring at them was nothing new, but what was new, Stella saw, was that everyone was staring boldly back at him, no eyes cast down. No one moved for a good 5 minutes. 10, 15, 25 minutes of silence and waiting. Then incredibly, and for no apparent reason, the sheriff stepped aside. He did not say a single word. He did not make eye contact with the men in front of him, but he moved out of their way. And Pastor Patton, Hobart Spencer, and Stella's papa walked through the door and disappeared into the darkness of that office. Nearly the entire Negro population of Bumblebee stood in the street, quietly waiting while the 3 men voted. Stella noticed something else and nudged Carolyn. Some of the white townspeople who had come to vote didn't leave when they were through voting. They stayed and joined the group standing outside the sheriff's office. Mrs. Cooper, the candy store owner, Mr. Bobbs, the bait salesman, Mr. Stinson, the mailman, the undertaker, and still nobody said a word. The sheriff scowled at the scene, then abruptly disappeared inside the office. 20 minutes later, just as Stella thought she was going to collapse with worry and anticipation, her father, the pastor, and Mr. Spencer emerged from the polling station, smiles lighting their faces. And now she saw what she'd expected to see earlier in Mr. Spencer's eyes. They were on fire.